So we are here today for co-buying land for community, how to get started. On behalf of Terran Collective and all of our incredible co-hosts, I am so excited to welcome all of you to this lovely evening. And thank you so much for joining us on your Saturday evening. I hope everyone had a beautiful day and got to go outside. Here in San Francisco, it was a beautiful, hot day. So I hope everyone took advantage of it. Yeah, so I'm gonna get started with our intro and let everyone know what we're doing here today. So Terran Collective is a community in San Francisco, and our mission is amplifying the work of people who are cooperating to regenerate our communities and our planet. And one of the things that's very dear to us is building community. And we would all like to be living, many of us co-house together already, and we'd be like to living in landed community real soon, hopefully within the next few years. And that's a big project. For those of you doing it already, you know how huge a project it is. And we realized that we have a lot to learn, and probably a lot of other people do too. So instead of doing this journey by ourselves, we decided that we would open it up and make it something that the wider community could experience. And originally, we were thinking this would be an in-person event for our Bay Area tribe. And that circumstances quickly changed. So here we are online, which is wonderful because not only do we have a huge Bay Area contingent, we ended up having people sign up from all over the world, mostly from the West Coast. We have our Portland crew, we have Seattle crew, we have LA crew, we have people in the Southwest. We've got some people on the East Coast that are staying up late for this. Thank you. We have one person from the Netherlands who I think it's the next day for them. Pretty cool. So I'm just really happy that all of this great information we're going to deliver tonight about co-buying can spread far and wide, and that you all can make use of it. Yeah, so enjoy. And I'm going to turn it over to Neha, another core steward of Terran Collective. And Neha's going to say a little bit more about who we are and who our co-hosts are that are going to be speaking to you tonight.
Cool. Can everyone hear me? Yay. Whoa, it's super validating to see a bunch of people just give a huge thumbs up on many, many squares. Thank you. Cool. So my name is Neha, and I'm so grateful that all of you had a chance to dial in and join us today. And there are lots of unfamiliar faces in the crowd and also a few unfamiliar faces. So we just wanted to do a little background on Terran Collective, who we are, what we're doing, and all those things, and then who we'll be hearing from today. So Terran Collective is a community of care and practice, building systems and tools for a regenerative future. We're core stewards of technologists, designers, permaculturists, activists, system transformers, artists, etc. And we are dedicated to amplifying cooperation among those working to regenerate our communities and planet by building systems and tools that foster trust and collaboration. And we're starting here in the Bay Area bioregion, and that's a really big, audacious, ambitious goal. So how do we distill that down into things that feel tangible? Well, we have 5 scopes of practice that we often refer to. One is community weaving and practicing resilience amidst rapid change, practicing solidarity and equity, and working together to regenerate the land we live on. Another is storytelling for cultural evolution. So how do we shift the narratives and share a story in a new way that resonates with different types of populations and communities? Our third is regenerating the commons, where we're hoping to rebuild our ability to collectively govern the commons. And this looks like lots of experimentation with different decentralized models and gift economies. Our fourth is collaborative ecosystem mapping. And what this looks like is as we sort of try to regenerate the commons, we start to transparently map the different resource flows that allow our communities to keep strong relationships and just make informed decisions. And that actually segues nicely into our fifth scope of practice, which is technology for thriving. So how do we design software that actually supports group coordination, collective sense making, and most importantly, offline impact? So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and a bunch of you have probably seen the invitation from Hilo, and we'll get into that towards the end as well. So that's enough about us. Let's talk about who we're going to hear from today. So we've got an incredible group of panelists and facilitators, and I'm just going to give you a brief teaser into who they are because they will, I can't do it justice at all. So we've got Cassandra Ferrera here, who is just an all-around movement builder and cooperative land project steward working at Green Key Real Estate here in the Bay Area bioregion. Maybe Cassandra, if you could unmute yourself and just say hi so people know who you are.
Hi everyone, so good to be here.
Cool, yay. We've also got Matt Holmes, co-founder of CoBuy, up and down the West Coast. Matt, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi, nice to see so many faces. Really excited to be here tonight.
Cool. And we also have AnnieRose here, dialing in from Portland, who's a real estate agent and affordable housing advocate, really focusing on what we can do outside of the white picket fence. AnnieRose, do we have you on here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can. Cool. And we've also got Ericka here, who is a San Francisco native and CEO of Green Key Real Estate. Ericka, do we have you?
Hi, nice to see everybody.
Cool. Yay, yay, yay. And Cliff, who is co-founder of Oak Granary and really has deep expertise and knowledge on all things law when it comes to this world. So really excited to be joined by Cliff. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello to everyone.
Sweet. So Claire will go into a little bit more detail of what this event looks like and the overall agenda, but what you'll see is we're going to go into breakout groups, and breakout groups will have facilitators. So some other folks who you'll hear from and just see on this event, one is Tibet, who is a communitarian and technologist working on tools and systems for all beings thriving. Can we get a, yay, we got a wave, awesome.
Hey everybody.
Tibet is helping us with a lot of the behind the scenes stuff today, so deep gratitude. Tibet is also joined by Aaron, who is a fellow core steward of the Terran collective, designer, deep thinker. There he is, cool. And we've also got Micah on the line, who gracefully introduced us with his amazing soundscape. Micah is a designer and activist working to make a world that works for everyone. Micah, I think we all know yeah.
Hi everyone, yeah. I am not the center of the universe, but I am the center of your musical universe for this event. So thanks for being here.
Rad. And then, yeah, so I'll let Claire take it from here and give a bit of an overview of what tonight looks like. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm paying close attention.
Awesome. Thanks, Neha. Great. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick event overview. Then I'm going to do a land acknowledgement, and then we'll get started with our first breakout room. So what we have here tonight is mostly going to be a really amazing panel with three of our co-hosts, Cassandra, AnnieRose, and Matt. And we might have Cliff jumping into guest star with the legal corner. And before that gets started, we're going to do a first breakout rooms. Fun fact about Zoom, the breakout room interface is really difficult to use. So we are going to do random breakout rooms for the first round and just randomly set you all into groups of 6. It's going to be a little to get to know each other. And then we'll go into our panel, which will be for about an hour, followed by Q&A. And then we're going to go into another round of breakout rooms. And this round of breakout rooms will be sorted based on your geography, your stage in the villaging process. And we have those breakout rooms matched with a co-host who is best suited to be able to answer your questions based on the questions that all of you submitted. So thank you so much for taking the time to fill out the pre-event survey. Yeah, and then after that, we'll have some fun hang time curated by Micah and some more opportunities to chat with our co-hosts. Yeah, I got unstable internet for a second, but hopefully I'm doing all right now. Meow meow. Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so it really wouldn't be right to talk about co-buying land without acknowledging the land. And one thing that we frequently do at Terran Collective is we have our friend Canyon, who's the representative of the Remetosh Ohlone Association of the San Francisco area. She will often do a beautiful land acknowledgement for us. And Canyon's not here today, and I'm non-native representative and resident of this land, so I could never do what she does. But what I'm going to do instead is just speak some offerings into the circle that can inform our conversation today. So the first is to acknowledge that, yes, we are on occupied Ohlone territory here in Yelamu, which is what they call San Francisco. And the peninsula is occupied and still is to this day by descendants of the Remetosh Ohlone people, and the East Bay, the Chochenyo Ohlone people. And those people are still alive, and they are there for guidance, available to help us steward this land. And all of us who are non-native residents of this land and anywhere in the world benefit from a history of colonialism and genocide. And that's just really important for us to hold into our hearts and acknowledge. That is not our fault, but I want to invite you to consider how it might be all of our responsibility to repair what is broken when it comes to the way that we treat the land and the original peoples of the land that we live on. And so the land, this beautiful earth, this beautiful planet is our mother, the source of life. She's our partner, she's our teacher, and we are all interdependent and in relationship with her as long as we live. And in a certain sense, it's kind of silly to talk about owning land, because can anyone really own land, or does the land own us? Do we belong to the land that we live on? And maybe a better way to think about this is stewardship of the land. And land didn't always used to be private property, right? So land used to be governed in commons and shared by the community that governed it. And that's a world that we can return to. And so the tools that we're talking about today, using the landscape that we have in modern Western culture to purchase property, to finance it, to create legal structures, to wrap it all up, these are tools we can use to return to better relationship with our land and perhaps even liberate the land from being a thing that's bought and sold on the market. Yeah, you know, and transform it from something that we see as a commodity to something that we value and care for on behalf of the 7 generations. Yeah, so those are some thoughts for the circle to consider or not as you see fit. So Neha says she has something to share. I'll turn it back to you, Neha.
Cool. Yeah. Did you feel complete, Claire?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Awesome. So a lot of us are probably wondering who is in the room. And just to give you a sense of what is happening here, where folks are dialing in from, we wanted to share with you what we thought was really interesting. And Claire touched on this a little bit. Here we all are co-buying land for community. But we have an incredible distribution of geographies of folks who are in here. So we have the Netherlands, the Bay Area. We have some strong communitarian in Portland who distributed this link. Thank you. You allowed us to connect with AnnieRose and bring her expertise to the room, which is awesome. And I also thought that this would be a great sort of exercise to recognize that it doesn't matter what geography we're in. A lot of us can practice this, and it starts with little land projects all over the world that allow us to just deepen this relationship. And then to just have a sense of what folks were interested in, 57% of you were interested in the legal aspect, 69% in the financing stuff, 58% in conflict resolution, and 69% in governance, which is awesome because this allowed us to really tap into all different lenses for this event and bring those voices to the table. I think it also shows that while many of us are here because we're interested in this, we're also interested in navigating the complexities. So you will all go into breakout groups really soon, but we also wanted to get a pulse of where folks were at in their current phase.
This is perfect for us. We should be like, this is where we're at.
Yeah, that's great. Well, your response is probably in here. Based off of the first 148 registrants, this is the current phase that folks were in. Most folks are community curious or in the squad assembling phase. A lot of folks are also really deep in it and ready to look for land. So we sort of tried to play, how do we put all the folks together who are in the right phase? And we hope that you get a lot of value from the breakouts that we put you all in. And these are not official definitions of these phases. This is just what we came up with, and we're open to changing those definitions. Cool, that was about it.
Okay, so let me check with our tech team. Tibet and Aaron, do you all feel ready to sort people into our first breakouts?
Yeah, the first one, as we said, because it is too hard to get everyone into rooms in a short amount of time, we're going to start with random groups just to get to know each other.
Right, so before we do that, I'll just give you all a little context. This is just going to be a little 10-minute session for everyone to introduce themselves to each other. It'd be great to share tonight what interests you about co-buying and what are your biggest questions. And then when we get back to the group, we're going to report out in the chat your biggest questions so that going into the panel, we have those to draw from. All right, I think we're ready to go.
Maybe we need music to lead us into the rooms too. That's a note for the future.
Micah!
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, everybody.
Hi. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Oh, you can?
I can hear you, but we can't yet hear the others, Danny and Eva and Eric. Do we have Danny and Eva and Eric and Christopher?
Do I think I'm going to turn it on?
Heard somebody. How are you? Wait, Game Cleese. What is your name?
My name is McLeese.
Okay.
It's resetting. I don't know. We played a game earlier in the week and it keeps
Got it.
resetting. Yeah. Is it so Tibet?
Yes.
Hey, nice to meet you.
One of the Terrans here in San Francisco. Where are you calling from?
I'm in Northeast Los Angeles. Don't know.
Cool. Well, our main check-in questions are, why are you here and what are your biggest questions?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just here to learn about it as much as possible. I've lived all over the United States and I've done some earthship stuff, and I used to study architecture and do alternative architecture, a lot of work in Latin America. And right now I'm not in a position to buy a house or move in with the community, but I hope that I will be. And so I just want to be educated.
Nice. No. I think I accidentally moved because it said someone was unassigned, but I think that was actually her. Oh, we're in the main room right now.
Yeah, we're in the main room.
Oh. I'm so confused. Whoops.
Wow. Zoom is useless.
Sorry.
We got Christopher Cantor and Eric with us.
So wait, how much minutes have passed? 3 minutes? Should I jump into a room and just check on people, or should I just leave it be?
Well, I think we can wait in here. More people still may show up. And since, I mean, Eric and Christopher didn't get put into a breakout room.
Because their audio is not connected, that's why. It's not showing them as unassigned.
Ah. Our audio is transmitting right now.
Yeah.
That sucks. So how is this normally supposed to work?
not our fault.
I can't hear anyone.
All right, well, I think
I
we're
can
all
hear you.
coming from our first round of breakout groups. And everyone, please feel free to post your group's questions in the chat. We're going to get started with the panel in just a sec once everyone comes back in. And we'll be pulling questions from the chat as well as going over some pretty big questions that we all have.
Cool. Does it look like we have most folks? Are we at critical mass? Okay, I think silence is a good thing. Thank you for the laugh, Adam Morrison. Great. So I guess before we go into the panel, I'm wondering if we could popcorn around. Did anything cool come up in the check-ins? Did y'all meet someone new? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. But not everyone at once. It's really overwhelming.
Neha, we would never overwhelm you. So there was, a great, what do you think?
Fantastic.
Great breakout group of people, but it was very short to really understand what each organization or each individual really wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, and we had people from Portland and the Bay Area, San Francisco, the East Bay, and also Los Angeles.
Cool. That's awesome. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, we had a great session, and we had a good through line, which is really, I think, kind of just wanted a model to reference our frame of thinking. Like, so what you guys have curated it's just amazing, a place to start of, size, how to even think of that, and number of people per what we want. So how to start with that. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, and I'm checking out the chat. It looks like folks were talking about governance. How do you deal with real estate zoning laws? What has gone wrong in the past? How to structure and balance commitment when different parties have different financial situations. This is all really great stuff. And we're excited to dive deep into this with all of you as well. So with that, I think we'll transition into our main panel. So if I could virtually bring to the stage Cassandra, Ferrera, and Matthew Holmes, and AnnieRose. Are y'all still with us?
I'm here.
I'm here.
Here.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool, because when you make noise, your squared then comes into my vision. All these new things that we're learning. Cool. I think so. We'll get started with that. And before we dive into these really, I think, intricate questions, would love to hear from the three of you first. What brought you here today? how did you find yourself in this incredibly beautiful niche of cooperative land stewarding? And how about Matthew? Is it cool if we start with you?
Excellent. Hi, everyone. First off, guys, thanks so much for putting this together. The amount of work that you've done is incredible. And it's truly exciting to see so many people who share common interests. I'm really stoked to be here. So just a little bit about my background, how I came to be here. Just over 4 years ago, I decided to move back to the US from the UK, where I had been for 14 years. And my background's in finance, and I moved in with my mother, my partner and myself at the time. We're living with my mother and my stepfather in Seattle. So shout out to all the people from the Pacific Northwest tonight. Glad you guys can make it. And we decided that we wanted to buy and own a home together, in context, of course, of kind of the current climate. And I loved what you guys said about ownership of the land. Can anyone really own land? It's kind of funny when you think about it. But we decided that it made sense for us, for social and for financial reasons, to team up and buy and own a home together. And we were driven by social motivations, the community aspects, the family aspects of living together, and sharing not only our time and our spirit, but also, you know, the day-to-day stuff and the logistics. I've always lived in community. It's always been very, very important to me to be around other people in a constructive, collaborative environment. And then there were the social, in addition to the social benefits, there are the financial benefits, right? And so we thought long and hard about this, and we were kind of dumbfounded by the fact that amongst the four of us, we had over 100 years of real estate and finance experience, but we still found this whole process really challenging. And it's not just a transaction. It's about getting everyone on the same page, and really establishing clarity around who's going to be involved. What are our goals? What are we looking to achieve here? Do we have that necessary alignment? And then how do we go about this big thing called co-buying, which at the time, you know, even the nomenclature didn't exist. If you Googled co-buying 4.5 years ago, nothing came up online. So we postulated that a lot of people were doing this for different reasons. Communities come in all shapes and sizes, right? And there was kind of no aggregate data or anything, but that was the spark that kicked things off. And my mother and I co-founded a company called CoBuy together to help people buy and own homes together and to do it intelligently. And so last thing I'll say is, it's not, you know, sometimes we think of it as a transaction, but it's not about a transaction. It's about coming together and forming an entity and really closing on land or a purchase or even building a structure is really just the start of a partnership that we hope is going to last for a long time. So how can we think intentionally about that? How can we inform ourselves? And how can we go through this process in the most logical way, but also the way that gets us all on the same page? So very excited to be here tonight and looking forward to meeting everyone. And again, thank you for having me, and great job.
Cool. AnnieRose, do you want to take us off?
You betcha. Let me pull down my handy dandy telemarketer headphones here. I bought my house when I was 25, thanks to some life insurance money from my dad. I had no idea what I was doing, but my first real estate agent is a now used car salesman. That's a really great profession for him, let's just say. But I did it because I had really great people who understood my vision. The mortgage broker knew that I was planning to live with housemates, and that was part of my financing plan. And so people really got what I was doing, what I was going forward with, and I was able to get a house. And if I hadn't had those people with me who understood what I was doing, I wouldn't have been able to make the purchase. And for many years, I ran a business making cloth menstrual pads, very Portland, Oregon. Yes, I did sign a release. My products were in the background of Portlandia. I'm not kidding. I mean, that stuff's real. I've been here for 15 years. So I'm like, where do you think that came from? I'm part of it. And I kept, you know, after I bought my house, I loved the process so much. We built a detached bedroom in the backyard. I turned the blank attic that had some weird, janky little like weed room with a hose up there. That was the extent of its built out. We made, I have a space that has 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And there's 5 of us living there now. There's a house next door that we rent. So there's 2 people living there. There's a tiny house on wheels in the backyard, and it's kind of our guest room. So we have this compound now, and I really love this life, and I want other people to be able to have access to this too. And just because there isn't a clear path because everyone else isn't doing something doesn't mean it can't be done. And I really think if we keep talking to each other, we can take this into our own hands and we can create a lot of these structures that we long for and that we need. So that's what gets me going, is the new projects, the new ideas, and reusing some of the old systems and structures that we have to put them to our own uses. And I'll talk about that later in this breakout session. But yeah, those are kind of some of the things that drive me, and I love this work. I love seeing people thrive and seeing the kind of communities people can create when we come together, because we are so much more than the sum of our individual capitalist isolated selves when we work together. So glad to be here.
So cool to be on a panel with AnnieRose and Matt. I found out that a lot of the Portlanders that are here are taking a permaculture class with Mark Lakeman. And Mark Lakeman is how I found AnnieRose, because I needed a real estate person in Portland. And I said, Mark, who's the one? And Mark said, AnnieRose. And it's been good times ever since. So it's fun to be doing this. Let's see. Well, I'm from Southern California, and it was just a very disheartening, disorienting place to grow up as a child. And I felt like just deep displacement and disorientation. And I was lucky enough to get up to Humboldt State University. And so I was up there, and I was in a place where the landscape and the people were really felt this an integrity. And I feel like I got the vision that guides a lot of us when I was, in college. I was like, oh my gosh, the infrastructure is broken. People are isolated. This is killing us and the planet. And I had become an environmental activist. And I just was like, okay, someday I'm going to help catalyze communities. I had no idea, fast forward, I'm 48 now, that was almost 30 years ago. And that's what I get to do, is help catalyze communities. So it was pretty fun to realize that, we keep living, and sometimes who you see yourself to be actually comes true. And so let's see, what I wanted to share with you is that I was one of those people, and still am, who definitely don't believe that the land can be owned, and that it's a big body of work that all of us are undertaking to be part of the great turning to actually decommodify the land and to re-engage the land as our partner. And so it's a spiritual mission. It's like a life path to really help reintegrate our lives as cooperative stewards in circle-based stewardship, even if we're in urban settings, to really get that that the land needs to be in cooperative stewardship circles. And so I've used the last 15 years of my real estate career to develop myself as somebody who can be helpful to that process. And I engaged in real estate from a hacker sort of mentality, okay, I got to go in there. I got to learn how this whole market-driven situation is set up so that we can disrupt it. And so I feel, after 15 years of doing that, I'm in an exciting time of my career of really helping to scale that disruption. And people are really ready for it. It's so exciting. I thought, it's going to take us forever to decommodify the land. And you know what? It's on. People are just, it's like a big no duh for a lot of people. about 14 years ago, I co-founded a small community with some of my best friends from Humboldt, and we were basically the only ones inside of our friendship group who were basically the burning souls who just had to do it. We had kids, and we just couldn't bear to live in isolated pods anymore, and so we were willing to live the experiment. And so that's what we did, is we just got started. And now I am very blessed because that led to other opportunities that, and there are people on this call who are involved in both of those stages of my personal community journey. And now I'm very blessed to be living the big dream, but it takes a lot of work. And myself and Ericka and our partners and about 20 other people are on 22 acres of land and working on a 8-home community. And it's a big body of work. And we call the land named us Landwell. And there's plenty more to say, but I'm super honored to be here and really grateful to be playing in this with all of you and with the Terran collective, who are doing such a great job bringing this together. So thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Super cool. And I think what comes up for me in hearing all those different journeys is the fact that we all came from this from a different perspective, a different lens, a different experience that led us to, thinking about this. And, I guess I should say, before I launch into the next question, we will have time for Q&A afterwards. Drop your questions into the Zoom chat and we'll make sure to look at all of them. So keep those coming. But given that we all do come at this from different perspectives, and we're really just wondering, where do we even begin? Do we start saving up? Do we start building all of our relationships? What type of loans do we need to be looking at? So curious to hear, especially given that so many folks here are in the community curious stage or the squad assembling stage, where should we start? What is the path? And I'll let any of the three panelists start with whatever their thought is there.
I'll start with our perspective and how we approach things. So this is big, and as was evidenced probably to all of you when we got into the breakout rooms. Everyone is indeed coming at this from a different perspective with different needs, wants, and desires. But how we like to approach it when we deal with people, and we're dealing with, for context at CoBuy, we're helping people, and we have helped people from Washington State, Oregon, and California, from urban areas to rural areas, and we've worked with big groups and small groups. What we've found over the last 4 years is it's really helpful to start with the inputs and stay higher for longer. This allows us to approach things efficiently and mindfully, but it also means that we don't get caught in that analysis paralysis. So we like to distill it down into the most basic elements of who's going to be involved in this and in what capacity. Next thing is, what is each party bringing to the table? And that has to do with financial inputs, but also desires, motivations, bright lines, and thresholds. And then what are the shared goals for co-ownership and for stewardship? And this is big. So this comes down to, what are we looking to achieve? And we can break that out into many aspects, right? Like what type of living situation are we looking for? What type of structures, which geography, but also how long is this, what's the envisioned duration of our joint stewardship or co-ownership? And so by starting at the very beginning, we can approach things efficiently and effectively. But when we start to look at the financial and legal views, because this is all correlated, there's the social element, there's the financial element, there's the legal and regulatory element, then the operational element, and everything's correlated. But for most of us, financing is going to be a prerequisite at some point, or for many of us, let's say. And so when we approach any sort of lending institution, whether this is a traditional lender or a more specialized lender, they're going to be looking at our financial inputs, both individually and collectively. So by getting on the same page and being very transparent about what each party is bringing to the table, it's going to make it easier for us to approach lenders, and also to understand what type of lender do we need to approach. You know, when we've worked with a group of, let's say, 5 people who are looking to do something in more of an urban area, traditional lenders are probably going to be an option for them. But if you're looking to buy land and construct community with, let's say, 20 or more people, going to Bank of America probably is not going to be an option for you. So having an understanding and a basis for proceeding is very, very helpful. It also ensures that we're all on the same page about the softer elements. And when down the line we start to think about legal considerations, these are really a reflection of what we're hoping to achieve. And eventually most folks who are going to decide to steward or co-own land together are going to have some sort of legal agreement. Some folks more robust or less robust, more prescriptive, less prescriptive. But that really ought to be, in my estimation, a reflection of our joint aims, as opposed to a kind of a living document that sits by itself in isolation. It needs to reflect what we're looking to achieve. So that's why we take this inputs approach to going through this process, regardless of the combination of people or how big or small or what we're looking to achieve. And I really just can't stress enough that transparency as well. Final thing I'll say is, you know, it's easy, I think, implicitly to just kind of assume that we're on the same page, but as the number of people involved grows, that's less and less the case. So by being very explicit and coming together and articulating all of these things and having an ongoing dialogue, we can make sure that we come together and establish that cohesion and that consensus that is not only a prerequisite for moving forward and will be assessed by lenders and any sort of legal professionals, tax and accounting professionals, but also means that we're going to set ourselves up for smoother sailing for the duration of stewardship or co-ownership.
Cool, cool, cool. Thank you, Matthew. Cassandra, what's your perspective on where a group should start?
Well, I think that before where a group starts, like every one of us has to start with ourselves. And we need to realize that this is a path that because decolonizing our personal interior landscape from the privatized way that we've all been enculturated to live is a life project. Not to mention the systems change of privatization that we're up against, the banking situation, the way real estate is practiced, you know, zoning codes, building codes, all of this is all set up for private extractive forms of ownership that benefit more wealthy and corporate organizations and individuals. And so we have a lot of work to do. We're like on the edge of a cultural revolution, and we're totally deconstructing and reconstructing at the same time. And I think that it's important to really take stock of yourself. Like, how much do you have the capacity to put into this project? Like on a realistic level of your of how much literal time you have, how much resources you can afford to put into that, and just to like really be aware that it's going to be like a big long personal growth workshop. And so, are you willing to do the work to come out of the corners of your own self where you're all, you know, trying to stay in control, because that shit's going to come up when you marry the land and get into a high stakes relationship with other people. Like, that's just going to your ability to recognize where you want to hoard power because it makes you feel more secure is going to show up no matter how much money you have. Like, that's going to show up. So I just feel like people need to start with themselves and really be like, get their vertical axis, their clear ethical like route in place. Like, okay, yeah, this is actually what I want to do. And okay, so that's dramatic and important, but also practical, because you just want to set up, like, you want to set yourself up to win. And maybe not win, but grow, to learn, to have it be successful, to have you feel like you're setting up systems of reciprocity that are feeding you. So where does a group start? Really, like, circling up and getting to know each other and starting to be just in the practice of doing the work, and realize that this is a continuum, and that the people that you're circling with right now may or may not be the people that you end up on land with. That there's a lot of swapping in and out as we filter and we discover, oh, the work of the group that you want to be in is actually different than the work of the group that I want to be in. And if we could, like, set ourselves up to actually discern and learn without making each other wrong and causing a bunch of unneeded drama and being divisive within our movement, like, that would be really healthy. If we could be able to say, yeah, you know, I realize about myself that the group, the organization community that I want to start has to center racial justice. Like, it just has to. That's the only kind of community I can live in. Other people may not feel like as ready to take that work on as deeply as you need to. Make that, like, okay to find your edge, your cultural edge that you're willing to push. And be ready to, I would say, compost your own idealism, you know, like, be ready to say, like, oh, I really thought community was going to be this visionary, awesome thing where we shared in the kids and the garden and the food and the music, and, like, it's so great. You know what? It is. And it's really fucking hard. And so, like, be willing to kind of let your idealism keep falling into the ground, like the plants at the end of the year, and compost, so that you can regenerate your commitment to change and to healing. So so I think a lot of this that I'm talking about, like, goes to kind of setting yourself up with, like, a good headspace, and your group in a frame that feels like, okay, we can do this work together. Start studying, start learning together, start pooling your money and hiring people to help guide you. Go ahead and practice what that's like, to say, okay, let's all put in $100 and hire somebody to come in and facilitate us for a little while. Start, there's so many ways. Definitely start meeting regularly, sharing food, and talking about what your, like, bottom line values and ethics are, and start talking into difficult conversations about money and power and stuff like that. And, like, say, like, okay, like, one of the things that we work on is getting to know each other's shape of our trauma. It's like, so you have a shape that your trauma takes, and the people who you live with are going to get to know that one better than you are. And so be ready to share with them what you know so far, and be like, this is the research I've done on myself so far, because y'all are going to have to help me see shit that I can't see. And so, like, get to know each other on really profound levels. Because I think that's actually your greatest security. I'm super down to talk about land trusts versus LLCs versus TICs and all of that great stuff. The legal stuff is our hack. It's, like, super juicy and interesting. And, but, it's really like, what kind of culture are you all going to build together, and starting to do that together now. Okay, obviously, it's my favorite topic, so I'm just going to pause and let AnnieRose dive in here.
Excellent. What an inspiration Matt and Cassandra are, and the whole Terran collective. I just met you all, but I'm just really excited to be part of this group. And I can see from the questions that there's so much wisdom and thought already in this room. And let me just give a little plug here that Cassandra isn't doing, but you might want to hire her to start talking to your group, because time and again, I've seen some really, really epic explosions of groups. And the way you, nobody likes to think about the divorce during the engagement period. But one thing you have to think about at the beginning is that exit strategy. And you set yourself up for, you go to marriage counseling, you set yourself up to have a really healthy relationship. And you commit as much time to that as you can. This is something you have to maintain your relationship to the land and to each other. And part of the sort of, this is the revolutionary aspect of it, is that because you are financially entangled with each other, it's going to bring up a lot of issues and you're going to get to know each other. And there are going to be times of great difficulty and great joy. And as Cassandra and I said, enrichment. that was our euphemism that we really enjoyed. It'll be very enriching, but it really will, because what capitalism does, I think, is tries to take away our capacity to feel. And when we reclaim that, whether it's moving through difficulty with each other, whether it's all like the magic joy of that music, that feeling when you get those keys and you're like, this is ours, I'm going to build a fire pit in this backyard. Like all those, when we increase our capacity to feel and connect to each other, we do that little tiny work of tearing this tiny chink in the monolith of capitalism. And that's what I see us doing here. I think it's important to acknowledge we're never going to get purity. We're never going to have no one housing issue is going to solve all the problems or make everything better. But what we can is we can tear these tiny little cracks here. And as you're all doing this, I also encourage you all to think about, the privilege and the systems and the exploitative systems that, have allowed us to be in these positions. And how can we make this more accessible and more inclusive to other people? And how do we empower other people to live in community individually as they want? And how do we make affordable housing accessible for everyone? And, for me, ownership is not the end all be all, because I'm kind of a real estate agent who kind of hates capitalism, a bit of a contradiction there, but private property ownership is the system we live within. And all that being said, one thing about starting is that people do this all the time.
In a relationship that's suddenly long distance.
Yeah.
This is not what I signed up for. How do we do this?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, now it's very different, but yeah, Cassandra can talk a little bit about the complexities of being in a big community in COVID. But there are like mortgage brokers, real estate agents like me, architects, urban planners, developers, surveyors. There are professionals out there whose job it is to help you. And so, a cottage cluster is a subdivision with a different intention. So as you're going along, start calling these professionals. There are people you can pay to help you, and then there are people like your mortgage broker and your realtor who get paid when you make a sale. So our job is to help you, and we're here to see you succeed. So that's build those relationships, but also call a realtor. Call me up. I got my email there. Call Cassandra, call Matt, and start, bringing these people onto your team, because we are there to help you. And there are a lot of structures out there. Just think of like, what's the normie version of your vision, and then look for those resources. And take people out to lunch. That's the other thing to do. Start taking people out to lunch, or send them some takeout and have a Zoom call with them, for people who are doing things that you're interested in or that you admire and you want to learn more about, and start building the process and building your network. So that's my spiel. On to the next topic.
Cool. Wow. So a lot of sort of what we're hearing here is Matthew, really be clear about the inputs and be really transparent with each other about what's happening. And Cassandra, where does a group start? Well, a group actually starts with yourself, and being really, really aware of who you are, and what different ways you might be showing up with yourself and within a group. And from AnnieRose, we're sort of hearing that this is complex, start now, but also something that really struck me, I think, when we were chatting earlier this week, is that you said cooperative buying is done all the time. This
Yeah.
is not the first time it's happening. So think about the ways in which we see this in the world already and learn from that. There is a lot of wisdom. Folks who are married are doing cooperative buying. And that was really grounding, I think, for me to hear. And it made it feel less all overwhelming. So that's sort of where we want to start. I guess we all have, you know, choose your own adventure of how you want to start with yourself and the inputs and the transparency and looking at what already exists. But there's also something else that's being brought up, which is the fact that this is difficult and complex and life changes happen. So as we sort of embark on this adventure to create structures that are legally secure and minimize risk, but also allow for the dynamic nature of community and your own life to thrive, how do you do that? And a much less eloquent way of saying this question is, what do I need to know now so that it doesn't bite me in the tuchus later? Because there's shit that's gonna come up. And we want to create spaces that allow us to be dynamic, to allow for this, you know, partner to come into your community, for this baby to be born, for these animals to happen, for people to leave and come and just to be in relationship in different ways. So what are these sort of legal concerns? What risk mitigation do we need to keep in mind? Whoever wants to start.
Okay, Golf. So I think that's a great question, and actually, I love that this has been one of the core elements of focusing, because I think it deserves a lot of attention. Risk is inherent in everything we do, right? If we go outside, we could be hit by a bus. I think in the current context, risk has become very real and present and apparent to all of us on a collective level. So I think a great place to start thinking about this is education. I really support what's been said tonight around engaging professional support and doing your homework and having those conversations. The risks that we're going to encounter are going to be different depending on our own scenario. But what we can do is look at some of these macro risks and start to think about those early on. So from the outset, if we're looking to jointly purchase and own steward land together in any form, we're investing social capital, so our relationships are on the line. And then presumably, to some extent, somebody's also investing financial capital. And so there's a lot at stake. And there's risk that we can break down into the transactional risk. So during the process, not engaging the right professional support can have big implications, which can affect our finances and our relationships. So we do definitely want to make sure that we're engaging the right professionals. For instance, sometimes we've seen, and rarely, but we've seen folks who kind of think that it's not necessary to engage a lawyer, and they're going about something very, very complicated. And in context, you know, we have to think about that's a necessary step in this process. We want to cover our bases when we have so much collective at stake. And so thinking about that risk on the transactional side, but also we like to at CoBuy help people think about the long-term risk, because I'm totally in accord with what's been said tonight. You know, getting married is if we use that as a metaphor, it's just a start. And so we have to think about what are the considerations and the risks throughout the stewardship and co-ownership. And just a few of those, I don't want to get too granular, but you know, death of one or more parties, job loss, delinquency in payment, disability or illness, all of these things can have implications for the collective. And so we like to help people identify what some of these common risks are and think about how they want to handle those, and come to consensus around best practice solutions. Now, the more people we're going to have involved and the more specific our own needs are, the more tailored we're likely going to want to be about this. But, you know, in a vacuum, there's an infinite number of things that can go wrong. In all practicality, there's a finite number of things. So thinking about those things and having, building consensus around how we would approach some of these core risks if they were to materialize, and then codifying that And I say that in a legal sense, but as I said earlier, any sort of legal agreement is just a reflection of dynamic decision-making and consensus. It needs to be treated as such. This is not a fill-in-the-blank job. This is big. So it's really important that we're thinking about these things early, doing our research and engaging the right professional support, and thinking about the risks and breaking them down between the different stages. And what was said earlier, again, I really agree with. There are risks even in the planning stage. We need to be really real with each other and what we're hoping to achieve, because if we are to make assumptions, those can come back to haunt us down the line. And unfortunately, I just want to highlight this, not to scare anyone, but just to really emphasize how important this is, you know, if we can't resolve agreements down the line, we risk litigation, and litigation is never cheap. Nobody wins in litigation. $25,000 to $50,000 just to get the ball started, likely to ruin your relationships, if not your bank account. So having that in mind is a really strong motivator for having these conversations, and getting that all out on the table early on. So happy to get more granular, but really excited to hear what everyone else thinks.
Shall I go? Shall I jump? AnnieRose?
Do it. Get it. Yeah.
Jump.
It's interesting. I want to like do the start with yourself thing again. Check out your risk profile. Are you the kind of person who like just jumps in with people that you either don't trust very much, and you like think you do and you're kind of in love with, and they have good charisma, so you just like jump in the bed with them? Or do you like, are you somebody who's going to take a long time getting to know somebody and make sure you got all your STD tests, and you're like, you know, just going to think about this and talk about this before you even go on the, you know, on a kind of a date? So like what's your temperature character around risk, and how old are you in a sense, like around that? And I'm not saying that a 20-year-old can't have like an older, you know, soul, but sometimes people who have kind of had that been there, done that experience, they're like, whoa, I did get burned. We did have litigation, or I lost a bunch of, you know, stuff. So like, where are you in your own like initiatory process? And to just, you know, do your best to take stock of that. And so risk, what's your risk profile? What works for you? I think that one of the things that we continually come up with is, how do you move at the speed of trust? So how does a group just keep building trust and then getting further in with each other? But the challenge is that getting the land, there's this like design challenge that we're in right now, is because we need the land or the housing complex or the cottage development or like whatever. We need our place, because our place is like our primary partner in this deal. And so yet acquiring that place puts us into an encounter with the inherent wealth disparities that are inside of our friendship groups. And so it's very much a tricky wicket that a lot of groups face. And I can't stress enough how much the legal frameworks are the hack. And so, you know, before I became a real estate agent, the only people that I was more suspicious of besides real estate agents were lawyers. And truth is, like one of my like prime collaborators on this call, Cliff Paulin, who hopefully you'll get a chance to interact with, is one of many incredible cooperative attorneys. And so there's so many cooperative attorneys who are keeping pace with our movement, and they're the ones who actually really help us deconstruct the wealth disparities that almost always come with actually acquiring land. And so find a cooperative attorney who really gets you, you know, and if you're in California and you can work with Cliff. He's our attorney at Landwell, and he understands what our endeavor is. And so, but I want to underline a couple pieces that like, and I've said enough maybe for this call so far, but really what we're doing is we're repairing relationships. And so we're repairing relationships with ourselves, with each other, and with the land. And so the biggest risk mitigating factor, I think, is how much repair you continue to be up for and capable of actually doing. And so, because together we can do so many cool things, you know, like at different scales when we're moving at the speed of trust and continually repairing relationship as an act, like again, as a practice. It's not like, oh, relationships repaired, yay, we landed, we got there. No, relationship repair as a cultural practice. And you know, I see there's some questions that really want to come up around land trusts and easements and conservation, and there's like all these really wonderful things that we can get involved with. I think one of the things that I'd like to say is that it's really important to know what scale you're working at. If you're doing a micro village or some sort of like, you know, where it's like a smaller size, a lot of people are really satisfied with the simple LLC. And it gives the most amount of flexibility, at least in California, for the projects that people get involved with. And so that's like a short answer to a complex question. But LLCs get in trouble because they don't necessarily have the full legacy legal stature to hold land in perpetuity if you do want to move it out of the market. And so then you're thinking about really long-term structures. You're thinking about, you know, council governed, circle board governed, 501c3 corporations with nonprofit status, churches, community land trusts, but those are also like complex bodies that take a while to develop. And so you know, it takes time to really mature something like that. And I'm not saying don't go for it. If that's your thing, definitely go for it, because we need more of those land holding, not-for-profit oriented organizations they're equipping themselves to steward land in perpetuity, because then you can really invest in some really unique economy and equity sharing models and ways that it's not just a short term. And I agree with everything that Matt said about, like, there are some limited things that could go wrong. Make sure you talk about them, and I would say do your best to make sure that the way that those things get handled, do your best to make it so that it doesn't, if somebody needs to get off the ship, make sure it doesn't capsize the boat. So set it up in such a way that the we starts to have more and more of a consideration than the I. And so that's one of the cultural bridges that we're coming across. It's not linear from I to we, it's actually I and we. And how do those two, like those two evolve together? And so I would just, yeah, I would say, I think the last thing I want to say inside of this is that, you know, like Matt said, have your legal documents be living entities, living, breathing things that aren't just constructed and read by people who have the brain for that or that particular style of, don't just be like, oh, you guys handle that part over there because you're the ones who can read through a 20-page document and have it make sense, because that'll actually start to create power imbalances in your community. And so how do you make that legal document come alive? And one of the ways that we have done it at Landwell is to create a narrative contract. And so we have legal clauses that address all the things that we need to address, all the death and liability and what ifs and acts of God and pandemics and well, we had other ones. We didn't actually catch the pandemic. We're working on that one. But the narrative is that it tells the story of who we are. And then it says, and therefore, this is our legal agreement with each other. This is our vision. This is how we intend to take care of each other, and therefore we include each other on our insurance policies. And so it helps to blend the worlds that we're working with. Boom. some cool sound just happened. I'm just gonna use that as my like.
Yeah, that was planned. I just muted you, Jonah. Sorry. Yeah, Cassandra, do you want to complete your thought?
I liked the ending. That was fun.
Incredible. Wow. There's a lot to dig into there. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Cassandra. AnnieRose.
You know, I will add a little bit to what Cassandra said and what Matt said. First of all, my goodness, does this woman have a way with words or what? Holy cow. You know, I think I will say that exit strategy, making sure that one person gets off the boat, doesn't capsize the boat, that is going to be key to mitigating your risk. And, you know, from, you know, also the easier it is, the more financial entanglement you have, the more legal risk you're going to have. And so as you're moving forward, thinking about structures that have easier financial entrances and exits. This can be creating a condominium, you know, ownership structure where you have, say, two structures. You know, there are people in Portland who are doing this where you have a house, you have an accessory dwelling unit, which is your granny flat, your additional apartment, and people create a condominium ownership structure where one person owns the house, one person owns the ADU, and you share the land in common. And that's something that normal human beings can do and are doing. And that creates this really easy entrance and exit. It doesn't, I mean, that's from a financial perspective. As far as, and I think it's also important to, you know, to recognize that, you know, we can protect our financial risks a lot, but part of this is the growth of, you know, of growing with other people, you know, and having these, as many of these conversations early, recognizing, I think a huge part of it is recognizing that there will be difficulty, there will be crunchy times, there will be disagreements. And when you work on that exit strategy now, you're doing it when you're your best self. So think of who you are now and how much you care for these people, and set yourself up to be that person down the line. Set yourself up with something as much detail as possible for how you are going to be able to be the best person later when you're like, if I have to look at another one of your dishes, I'm going to fucking kill you. I don't want, just get out of my house. So you're in that moment, you have this beautiful loving document that Cliff or another attorney has helped you design, and it's been signed by a notary, and you know what's going to happen when you just want to like just break all the dishes, you know, and keep investing in those relationships. So think about separate ownership structures and start small too. You know, your first project doesn't have to be the huge project. If this is something you're interested in, buy something small with a few other people and grow from it. And take good notes and write blog posts about it so that everybody else can keep doing that too. Please document. So that's what I'm gonna say. That's what I got.
Wow, thank you. So at this point we could, is Cliff still on the line with us?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for the perspective on how do we set ourselves up for how things will change. I love that we all spoke about these things as living documents, and I really appreciate that. And of course, yeah, not a lot of us predicted pandemics, but it sounds like you're putting that into the agreements now, and that's great. And Cliff, it's so great to have you on the line. Wanted to hear a little bit more from you, if you have a few minutes, on what we should really keep in mind when it comes to the legal aspects of things. And whatever is top of mind sounds good. Some of the questions that we're hearing are, what are the different entities that we can set up? What should we keep in mind when it comes to zoning? So there's a whole buffet of options we could talk about when it comes to the legality of all of this. Where do you want to take us?
Oh, so many places. But I guess I'll just start with a couple little high level issues, because I think that's really what we've got time for and space for tonight. But first, I just want to say also thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to all the other people. Thank you to the teachers who have paved the way for all of us to be where we are today. you know, we are standing in the footsteps of people that have been doing this work for generations. And if we pay attention, we can be the beneficiaries of both all the great things that they learned and the challenges that they faced. I would say, to reiterate some of the things that I've heard here tonight from a legal perspective, the first thing is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for any one person. When people come to me and say, I'm ready to start a community, I'm saying, great, let's start a conversation. There are a whole buffet of legal structures that are available that Cassandra mentioned earlier. One that I do use a lot with clients is the limited liability company in California. It's a very flexible structure. It allows for buy-in, buy-out to occur fairly easily. It allows for people to tailor that structure to their own individual needs and for that structure to change over time. It also is gaining more acceptance in the greater financial sphere, which is helpful. As many people will probably attest to that are in this realm, finding financing for these types of projects is often one of the biggest hurdles that people face. And so finding a structure that a banker can look at and say, oh, I know what that is, I can lend to that, is really helpful. That being said, it's not always the right structure for people. And I think that there is this part of this whole work in communities, which is the, how do we both start where we are, because that's where we have to start, and how do we move towards that more aspirational place that we hold in our hearts of decommodifying land, returning indigenous wisdom to the ways that we manage land, recognizing the power and privilege structures that even allow private property to exist in the first place. And that there are a lot of structures out there that are moving further in those directions. And those might be something like a 501c3 that holds title to the land. It might be a community land trust. It might be private ownership, but with a majority of the development rights held in a conservation easement by another land trust entity. And there are new and emerging structures that are popping up all the time, which are really exciting, that some work really well in urban environments and some work well in rural agricultural environments. So I'd say the first thing to do is to understand where you are and where you want to go and what you and the people that you're working with need to do to get from where you are to where you want to be, with the understanding that failure will happen. And how do you make failure your ally, so that when it happens, you can learn from it and you don't fall apart, or maybe you do fall apart and you learn again. As Annie said, you know, documenting and sharing is useful in any of these situations. Yeah, the other thing I would just say to keep in mind when you're thinking about what legal structure you want to embody for your community is, what are those values that you really need to protect as most sacred? And I think without ascribing any value to judgment to any type of form, it's useful for you to understand, what do I need right now? Am I in a position where I could invest in a project where I put a large amount of my financial resources into it with the understanding that no equity or very little equity will ever come back to me as a result of that, because I believe in that decommodification of land and I believe in these principles? Or am I in a position where I have a young child and I need to be thinking about other factors, and that is not a reality for me? And again, like Matt said, being transparent and being honest with both yourself and the people that you're engaged with is really, really important. I think that it's all too common for us to self-assess in an incorrect way and to say, I am the aspirational self that I wish I was. Well, you may not be today. And that's, I think it's okay to recognize that we are where we are today. Yeah, what else to say about it all? I do think, as Annie said, the less financial entanglement you have, the easier it is for one or some people to leave a group without sinking the ship, the better, or at least that has been my frame of reference. for the last 10 years, it's been interesting looking at community in the COVID-19 reality, and that perhaps we may be entering a phase where it's more important for things to stay cohesive than it is for people to be able to leave easily. And that's a really important discussion to have with a group of people. I think typically you don't want someone to stay in a relationship or in a situation that doesn't work for them. And so allowing enough flexibility for people to leave when they need to is important. But I think that we may be entering into a phase where we need more time and energy dedicated to that marriage counseling before divorce is brought about than we did in the past. And I think also, you know, this is a really interesting time to be thinking about what is it that we're thinking about collectively in terms of what we want for the land, but also collectively in terms of how do we want to interact with each other. If we're in a lockdown situation, isn't it nice to be able to interact with the people that you live with because you all have the same health protocols or spiritual backgrounds? And not to say that we should homogenize and everyone should be exactly the same, but the more alignment that we have, especially as we move into what I think everyone anticipates to be more and more difficult times to create community and to live in a good way on this planet, are important to consider. And yeah, and I'll leave it at that. And I can answer some higher level questions for people in different breakouts. And I also just want to be clear that I can't answer a specific legal question for anyone tonight. It's not the proper venue to offer legal advice to anyone in a Zoom call of 100+ people. And so I'm gonna leave it at that.
Thanks. Our trust in you is already increasing. We know we can understand what boundaries we're in here. So we had dreams and ideals of sort of around this time having a really quick break, but I'm going to say that we're going to stay actually for one more question. If you feel like you need a break, please feel free to do what you need to do. But we've got just so many incredibly rich questions coming from our chat over here. And while we seem to be a little bit behind, there's one question that feels really important and actually just very close to my soul. And so I'd love to surface this with all of you and see where we can get, knowing that there isn't enough time to actually dig into this. So we'll try to keep this to maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but I think it's really important to address with the large group here. And this is about diversity. And when we think about these communities that are forming, these visions that we're seeing, and the types of humans who are having these conversations, it's really important to look around and see who's not in the room. And this shows up in many different ways. Do we have financial diversity? Do we have different types of socioeconomic diversity, cultural diversity, neurodiversity? How do we address that, and how do we keep ourselves in check when dreaming about this beautiful world and making sure that it is an inclusive, accessible space?
Woohoo! You!
I know there's no real answer, but how do you, I mean, this is a practice. There isn't a checkbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I'd like to see, happen, I've noticed in some communities in Portland, is that, taking clients of color out to some of these communities, they said, this feels like such a white place. Like, I don't feel myself here. And so a question I have is, like, how do we design these from the ground up with something that appeals to and that connects with people from marginalized communities that we're not seeing at these tables? And so, I think that's a matter of reaching out to housing groups in your area and saying, hey, I'm doing this project. I have some resources. I work with Proud Ground, and I actually, which is a land trust in Portland. I do that because they have made connections and built trust with marginalized communities that I can't do. because I don't have the time. I don't have 20 years of building up that trust. And so going to these resources and saying, hey, like, and being willing, I mean, I think we're talking about resource distribution. And I think that means actually distributing resources to other people who are able to make those choices. And so these are big questions. You know, it's I think reaching out to people and asking their opinions and making places of power at your table. That's kind of, I don't know. I don't think I haven't come up with the end all be all answer yet, but that's what I'm working with now. That's one idea I have.
I think this is a great question. I think there are very real disparities in terms of capital. And if we look at, you know, on a systemic level, lending practices, real estate practices have been inherently unjust. This is something that I think personally my eyes have really been opened to over the course of the last 4 years. But there's also disparities in terms of information and knowledge. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us who do work in and around the space and have some sort of collective expertise to do what we can. And on a micro level, you know, it is hard because ultimately we, you know, at CoBuy, we want to give as much as we can, and we still have to make sure, you know, that we maintain a going concern as a business. But one thing we found to be very powerful is doing these informational sessions. So those have found really good buy-in in Oakland, particularly for people of color. And I think the more that we can do that and transmit information and help people understand how to go about this, what resources are out there, and to connect them with those resources, I think that benefits everybody. And I think it'd be really cool. And again, big congratulations to the host on such an amazing event, but I hope that this can be a genesis of a dialogue between everyone who's involved here, and we can explore how we can do that together, because it's going to have to be a collaborative and ongoing element.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of decolonizing work to do on lots of levels, and there's systemic marginalization that's happening, and my personal favorite way of addressing that right now is the growing community land trust movement. And so I feel that as a community vehicle, not just it's a great host for an intentional community as a legal structure, and it's also a wonderful vehicle for your local community, your regional community, to come together and really value the secure housing of the people who are the most marginalized in your community, and to do so in a way that isn't paternalistic and like white savior complex stuff, but like really in a place of working with people who and going from them having massive housing insecurity and precarious lives to building equity, making decisions, and being very empowered where they live. And that feels like an important transitional thing we can all invest in that. You can become a member of your local community land trust and take the concern of your larger community's equity into what you hold as your activism and your area of concern. So even if your own community isn't a community land trust or doing that work, I think there's ways to actually help do the community building work on systemic levels at the same time. And so in our community, this is a pretty hot issue. We're mostly white. We're totally like aware of the fact that we're in a very privileged circumstance. We kind of like have a bit of the living the dream projection onto us, and because here we are an hour and a half out of the Bay Area on this beautiful land, and we're sorting it out, and the people in it are like, oh man, our sleeves are rolled up, and like we are barely sometimes keeping it together to build this new structure that we hope contributes to this major cultural evolution that we're part of. But meanwhile, we have a lot of work to do ourselves, and we come at that work with different histories. And so we do study groups here. Like, we're like, okay, we don't want to like what's authentic for us. We are not going to, you know, try to build the racial diversity of our community in a way that is tokenizing or weird, or like, it's just not like, we're not gonna, that's not how, but how do we build a place that be in our lifetimes and are beyond our lifetimes is safe and inclusive, and has people who come here feel like, oh, these people are like not just spending their privilege to make their lives better and their children's lives better. They're also spending their privilege to do the work to change the world. And so we do study groups here where, you know, we read White Fragility, we read My Grandmother's Hands, we talk about it. We sometimes we get into conflict about it. We have people in our community that are like, this is the most important thing. And then we have people in our community that say climate is the most important thing. And then there's people in the community that say both are the same thing and they're the most important thing. And so, oh, something just happened. Oh, are we getting Zoom bombed? Or is somebody just accidentally sharing their screen?
It's Denise Kusef's screen.
Yeah, I think
sorry, that was me. Yeah, bye.
Okay. I actually got Zoom bombed, so I'm like, okay, that shit happens. Anyways, yeah, so doing the work, all of us in our communities, doing the personal work that it takes to see whiteness and privilege and economic privilege and all the, you know, just to be, and because it just is gonna come up inside of your community, even if it's not just about racial diversity, like all these other diversities that you mentioned. But it's important, obviously, that we take on in our communities, I think, like really doing the work of also addressing the racial inequities that our situation actually, like I have the privilege that I'm in because of a racialized system. And so we just need to talk about that, and not just talk about it, but to have the talking matter in how our cultures build in our community and our structures change. So it's a big one, and it's uncomfortable, and it's real, and it's also part growing up. And that's one of the things that I've learned from one of my teachers, is that this is the growing up work. This is actually us maturing into whole human beings. And so, and to me, that's attractive. Like, I want to be a grown up. I want to be a deeply, like, a person who can help with the parenting of the world. And so I need to keep working on growing up myself. And so thanks.
Wow. Thank you all. I know that was just the beginning of what is promising to be a very potent conversation, and something that's very real for all of us. And I'm already thinking about how we might just have future sessions focused on maybe community land trusts, or talking about different practices we all embody to think about this in our different communities. So unfortunately, we'll have to wrap there. Thank you all so much for your insights. We're gonna go into the next part of our event. We're a bit behind schedule, so I just really want to appreciate everyone for their ability to stick with it. And yeah, this is just the beginning. So I'm still processing all of those responses. I'm very excited to continue this. But here, I think I will hand it over to Claire, who will give us a bit of a background on what breakout rooms will look like. So thank you all.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you to all of our amazing panelists, Cliff, Cassandra, Matthew, AnnieRose. That was incredible. So much juicy stuff that I think we'll all be processing for a little while. And thank you, Neha, for that amazing facilitation. And everyone following along in the chats. I'm just loving this. So now we're going to transition to our breakout sessions. We are about half an hour behind schedule, but we're just going to keep going. This is epic, and everyone please do what you need to do. If you need to take a bio break, now's a good time. So what we're going to do is move into breakouts, and The prompts for each group are in this collective harvest document I just put in the chat, and I recommend pulling that up. I recommend each group having a scribe that is responsible for taking notes. And then if anyone in the group wants to be a facilitator to help keep things moving, that's a great idea too. But basically we have about 3 questions for each group. The groups are based on geography and where you are in your villaging process. And we did our best to match people up. For people where you're the only person from your geography, we put you in the next closest one so you can make some friends. And yeah, we did our best with that. And huge thank you to Tibet and Aaron. They have been putting people into breakout groups for pretty much the last hour. Again, Zoom does not make it easy. So that is, I think that is everything with the breakouts. So we're gonna give half an hour in the breakouts, and each group is going to be self-directed, so you can just get the conversation started around those questions and whatever you want to chew on after that amazing panel. And then you're each gonna have a co-host join you in your group for half the time, for 15 minutes. And our co-hosts are gonna spend the first 15 in one group and then transfer to another group. So all of you will have a chance to ask more questions with one of our co-hosts. So yes, I think that is everything. Let's go ahead and hit the breakout.
Whoa, that's so fast.
Thank you, Breakouts team. You guys are amazing.
Breakout.
All right, I'm gonna pause the recording and
oh, yeah, sure.
in the live stream right now as well.
Hi, everyone watching our live stream.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone who want to type in the chat to volunteer, and then we'll hear you for just a minute or two before we start to do our closing. Anyone?
I'd love to hear from maybe one of the ready to land groups, the folks who were ready to look. What sort of came up in your conversations, questions? I can also look at the list and decide who to pick on, so everyone be ready.
I can jump in actually and just share a little bit from our group. We're one of the Bay Area curious groups. And let's see, some of the main questions that came up, we have to, Laureate Hobbs of Alethea was in a group, so it's great to have the perspective of someone who's doing this and building village on land Northern California right now. And I kind of brought a perspective of having spent some time at Tamara, which is an amazing eco-village in Portugal, and a lot of lessons from there. And so some of the things that we talked about are how having like the purpose of the community be core and fundamental, even more than the relationships, allows something to last across generations. And another thing we talked about is like, okay, so then what do you do when partnerships fall apart, when there's like relationship issues between partners, and how can that like totally sink a group? And again, it was like, okay, well, if you have the purpose and the vision of the community first, and each of those people has their own relationship with that vision, with that purpose, then you can potentially survive partnerships falling apart. And of course, having more people makes that easier. Having more of a village scale than just like a few friends makes that a lot easier. Yeah, those are a couple things we talked about. We had a great conversation, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Awesome, thanks, Tibet. Yeah, I'd love to hear from the Ready to Land group. I feel like y'all could have been talking about some juicy stuff.
Well, I'm probably not the most articulate of the group, but I am the one willing to talk. So we talked about alternative financing. You know, it's in the Bay Area, you often see people who have capital but not income. So, you know, aside from getting your conventional loan, where they look at the average of the past 2 years of income, one was friends and family, and utilizing your network and offering some sort of annualized return package as part of that. You might consider that some people are going to be paying rent while others are going to have the equity. We didn't talk about that part, but that's how I imagine the rent would go towards that return towards the investors. Another option is potentially if you have good credit, getting a line of credit, which is not that much, maybe 100,000, but pooling that, you can maybe do something. And then I've not researched that at all. And then another one is a hard money loan, which tends to, I think, have pretty poor terms. And then another thing that came up is that the real estate market is going to shift in the next year, probably. And that it might affect financing as well as the market itself. So that's on the financing side. We also talked a ton about place, you know, the order of, you know, getting your people together or picking the place. And we were split. The reason I was in the group and a few others, even though I don't have like everyone together, is I think that it's really important to have a place that can galvanize people. That came up. Having the place, being able to walk the land, you know, and having a core group, maybe 3 people together, and then inviting people once you've got the place landed out. On the other hand, it's really important to have people, because the agreements that come into play and the structure of how you manage, and also power can be weird, you know, if the early people have equity and stuff, and then the people later on don't have the same amount of power. How do you deal with that? So yeah, that came up.
Thanks, Josh. That's great. And yeah, that was wonderful. Very articulate. I'd also love to hear from the Deep In It group, because I am also very curious. What happens when you're deep in it? Anyone from that group feeling brave?
Hey, this is Yona.
Hey.
Yeah, I think most of the groups in there were kind of deep in freshly starting new community of some sort, and it's also tough. It's the beginning. There's not necessarily fully hashed out, so they're still trying to either figure out the plan, get members. It's a rough go. And I remember for our community, which we're about 10 years old now, definitely the first few years was just wild, you know, but it's beautiful. I think most people had a real specific project and a real specific vision they were trying to complete at this phase. For me, Cassandra came in our group. We talked a little bit about just as well, the changing of the economy. And I just made a reference to that when we bought our community was 2010, it was the bottom of the market. You know, we bought 9 acres for $910,000, seller carried loan, 10 people, probably about 15 grand a person. It was very manageable. And people who didn't have 15 grand, they borrowed it from one of the other people. And I think that time is coming again. So for everybody in all the other groups that weren't in the Deep In It group, it's going to be a pretty amazing time in the next year and a half to find these crazy, weird properties that nobody can get rid of, but they need to, that are selling for more than half price. And it's not something you should just try to figure out in a year from now. You need to figure that out right now. You need to start preparing, getting your ducks in a row, because there will be a lot of seller carry options out there for the projects coming up. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. All amazing points. This is definitely a really interesting time, a great time for us all to be digging in on community and co-buying and getting ready, because things are going to get really interesting the next few years. And yeah, hopefully that means that a lot of land becomes more accessible to people. It's going to be a wild ride for sure. All right. Thanks everyone for joining the breakouts. And Nay is going to wrap things up.
Oh, there's one more group.
Oh, there's another group that wants to go. We don't have time for every group to go because we have quite a few groups.
But if it's quick, go for it.
All good.
Go for it. Okay, cool. Well, again, thank you everyone for staying with us until this time. I'm going to make this really quick, short, and sweet, and potentially awkward. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, cool. So thank you all for joining us. The information of the panelists will be available to you. Here's a quick blurb about them, but I'm not expecting you to read all of this. I will send it out. However, if you want to screenshot, now is your time. You've got their information, a little bit more about their backgrounds and what they specialize in. But if you don't want to screenshot and you're hanging out on the couch, that's okay too, because we're going to send out a directory of all of the breakout rooms, the people who were in your breakout room and their email address, where they were at in the phase, so that you can pick up these conversations on your own. And that will also have the information of our panelists as well. So that will come at you from our email. And those who have asked for their information to be removed, that has been removed. You can also join our conversation on Hilo. So all of you should have received an invitation to the villaging community on Hilo, where there's already lots of great content happening around all of these discussions and incredible resources. So more on that soon. I'm just gonna check the chat because I see things are happening there. Oh, cool, it's us things, great. Great, so that's a little bit more about that. And wow, that was a lot of information. So here are some really cute animal pictures for us to just take a moment to pause. I would really especially love folks to pay attention to the bottom left, where there is a butterfly. If you don't look closely, you will miss it. Yeah, cool. So we're coming to the end here, and I just wanted to really appreciate everyone who put their time towards this event. Between all of the facilitators, panelists, and brainstorming sessions, there were about 95 collective hours that were contributed to this event. I forgot to preface that this is going to be the cheesiest slide that you're going to see all week. So yeah, apologies, and you're welcome. So we would love to reciprocate those who have put their time and energy towards this, like Matthew and Cassandra and a bunch of folks who are working in our decentralized green room right now. And you're probably wondering how you can do that. Well, you can donate to our Terran Watershed, which is our nonprofit entity. And Claire just dropped the link to that in our Zoom chat. If clicking on a link and going into another window is not really your vibe, we've got a solution. You can also Venmo me at Neha Sharma, which will also be dropped into the Zoom chat. And you can tell it's me because it's my face with a giant leaf next to it. If that's not it, then it's the wrong Neha Sharma. Yeah, and if you have any thoughts, comments, reactions on how this went, this was a total experiment. We've never done this before. We wanted to do it in person. Here we are now. I don't know, life is unpredictable. But let us know any thoughts, anything that would have been better for next time. Reach out to us at info@terran.io. We would love to hear from you. And this is the only way that we can learn and do better. So that would be really wonderful. Any hoodles, that's it. Oh, right, I forgot the spinning animation. That was important. Cool, well, thank you so much. Again,
Question.
Yeah.
Do you plan to continue this kind of thing, or was this a one-off?
Given the response, so for perspective, I'll go back to this slide so we can look at animal pictures and my Venmo handle. For perspective, we imagined this event to be about 50 people, maybe 30 with attrition. And when we made this available, we filled up to be 100 people within, I think, 48 to 50 something hours. So there's obviously a huge demand. And our dream is to have a villaging series. And given the response that we've received here, we really hope to make that happen. If you have specific ideas for future topics and sessions, would love to hear those. Yeah, so that's a really long-winded way of saying yes. Also, thank you, Noelle, Nevin, Jonah, Darshana, Laura. Wow. Thank you so much. My phone is blowing up and on low battery. So maybe those are the only names I get to call out, but this has been really, really fun and inspiring. Yeah. Are there any other questions or just comments?
Will the chat be put in the note document, or should somebody screenshot or like copy and paste the chat?
Yeah, so
I'm saving it right now.
Yep. It's going to be saved, and what we'll do is we'll parse out the questions and put them in the document as well. And then in the directory, which will be a spreadsheet, I just decided that I have to ask other people, but we have right now just names of folks in one tab. Maybe we create a separate tab that has resources, because there were really cool PDFs and other websites that were surfaced here. I don't know. Would that be helpful to you all?
I'd like that.
I see jazz hands and thumbs up. Great. Anything else, I guess, for any of us?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings, blessings.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We're doing it.
So at
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Let's stay connected. Stay connected.
Bye.
47
Like a million people.
Sure.
Much love.
So we're gonna actually move into unstructured time right now. If folks want to hang out and keep chatting, we'll be here. Micah has a couple of experiences for us to have. Wills, I'm gonna mute you. Sorry. Yeah, Micah, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am. Neha, can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Oh yeah, derp, sorry. Let's see, technology, great.
Okay, you know what, I'm just gonna put on a little music here, okay. So, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. So we wanted to do our best to sort of replicate the experience of an in-person event. Our original dream with this was to host this as an in-person event here in the Bay Area. And one of the things we all love about events is that we get to meet people and like have one-on-one conversations with people and maybe make some new friends. So there's an experience called Icebreaker that we'll be offering, and this is a platform that's built by some friends of mine. It's a really cool little, well, I'll explain it when you get there, but basically it'll give you the opportunity to meet people one-on-one and kind of play some fun connecting games and have some conversations with them. So I'm gonna paste that into the chat if you wanna do that. And then, okay. So you can head over there if you want to meet some people one-on-one, make some new friends. And are we still doing like breakouts if people have more questions for the co-hosts?
Yeah, so we're not going to go back to any breakout sessions, but we do have some of our co-hosts who might be staying on the line. We're only going to go till 10 at the latest, but that means we have 20 more minutes. So for any co-hosts who want to stick around, y'all could just pop in and say hi. And people can feel free to post questions in the chat, and we can try to direct traffic and do a little extended Q&A.
Should we join the icebreaker or should we?
Yeah, so I'll say that I still see AnnieRose, Cassandra, Ericka, and Matt. And no pressure for all of you to stay. It's been a long night, but as long as y'all are still here, if people have questions for them, we can definitely surface those. So Noelle is asking, how long would you say on average it takes to start this process? That's a pretty open-ended question because it depends on what you mean by this process. Noelle, can you get more specific?
Yeah, I guess I was just like, what's the ballpark range on like starting like talking and then actually like buying land, like just basically like if you've known people who've done this, like what's the ballpark range on, like, is this years or I don't know. I thought I'd throw it this timeline.
Couple months to a couple years. It depends.
Yep. Couple months
It
to a couple years.
depends on.
Yeah, it depends on the group, right? Like how cohesive is the group to start?
It depends on how big your project is too. If you're looking at doing any building, it's gonna, the permitting process and the design process just takes some time. So if it's already, if you find something that already exists, they can move a lot quicker.
And to tell Cass's and my story a little bit, she and I have been friends for years and years, and we were talking amongst us and our partners for over 10 years about doing this. And then it all came together in 6 months because the land called to us and we just made it happen. I think it was a little speedier because we're real estate agents, so we kind of knew how to do the process. You know, we know how to get loans, we know how to, you know, pull in lawyers, we know how to do all that, but it can happen really quickly, and we've worked with people. And so that's, you know, why trust, you know, at the speed of trust is a by statement that we're working with a lot in our community.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting just like navigating the in-between times of trying to figure out what makes sense, you know, like something more permanent or like something in between before we can like really get land together. But yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat right now about land ownership agreements being separate from income generation and sharing agreements, or does it make sense to mingle the two? And it really depends on what your model is and what your intentions for the land over the long term are. And so it's challenging to totally crack into that, because the land ownership as a
it looks like we have just a few people here. Maximilian just joined. Nice. A few more people.
Micah, we can hear you in the main group. Intentional or not?
Okay. Maybe he just. So, okay.
Yeah, keep going, Cassandra. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I wish that I could answer this question with a little bit of a fresher brain, because I find it really interesting and I think a really important one in terms of how we set up the what we perceive of as valuable within the community. And so if like you think that, oh, the security is in the land ownership, but maybe if you can get the land ownership in a place to where it's actually it's not going to get sold again. If you can actually get it protected, then your economic activity and equity building activity and all sorts of stuff can happen in a sense like, and this is the community land trust model, where it's disaggregated from the quote ownership of the land, like the activities that you're doing, including even the provision of housing, can happen in a way that doesn't kind of crack into what we usually think of as valuable as equity in land. So anyways, it's a I'd love to talk more about that.
We have a good question from Carla about, okay, I'm just going to read it unless Carla wants to speak it.
Go for it, Claire.
No, you go for it.
It's written in there. I just wrote, my experience in community houses so far has been that shared ideals is often not enough to create like a really deep and lasting community. And I'm curious what you all have seen, what kinds of glue, I'm gonna say, you've seen be most effective or like necessary for creating that lasting community.
Great question.
I mean, I think one of the beautiful things is that, one of them can be going through difficulty together or going through something that is hard together. And, weathering through it. And I think doing things together, like creating something, building something. It doesn't have to be your house. What you have made something together that lasts beyond your ideals in the physical world. But I bet Cassandra has some good ideas. I've seen some good things there.
For sure, yeah. But I love what you said about going through hard stuff together. I think that's actually like one of the biggest glues is growing up, getting initiated, having it almost blow up or part of it blow up, and then the people who are like, so, like we went through this time at Landwell where it was like the basket that we were in just felt like it was shaking, and like some people flew out, but then the people who stayed in were like, you're in, oh my gosh. And then like the whole thing settled down into this deeper place of trust and connectivity. And so I think, there's all this cautioning against the tough times and everything, but then it's like, it's tough, it's messy, it's hard, it happens. So like, but the glue, I think, is also the trust building practices, the working the land together, the doing ritual and ceremony together, finding ways to pray together, really having it be something that where you get like, you don't just talk about your shades, you actually live them. You struggle with raising kids together, but then work through then you can really trust people when you've gone through tough times with them.
Thank you, guys.
Ericka said Burning Man. It's a good training ground.
Yeah, community though is like extended Burning Man. Burning Man has nothing on doing a land project with people.
I got a quick question.
And I agree with what you just said.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are about doing this with really dear old friends. Any sage advice? And just,
oh my gosh. That was really a big question for me, because the people that I thought for sure like I would do this with, we did start our first community together, and we thought we were dear old friends at that point. We were still in our early 30s, and we saw a lot of growing up to do. And so, like Ericka said, she and I, luckily, we had over 10 years of friendship before we started Landwell together. And so our community is a mix of dear old friends and newer people in our lives. And so I think that, you know, it's part of that composting of idealism and that sense of a continuum, that like, that those dear old friends are still like my dear old friends, and they come here and they know that I'm in this community with this dear old friend and all these other people who are, you know, the challenge is that the people that you really drop into the land with, like, become your people, and you're spending a lot of time doing a really big thing together. And so it can stress some of those dear old friends, and they can feel discluded and not actually like part of this thing that's taking up all of your time and attention. So it can be stressful to old friendships. But I have to say that the people who I formulated those values with, turns out most of them are not the people that I currently live with, and there's some grief in that, and then there's also some acceptance and some learning about like about how to actualize the vision of something, that it really takes people who then aren't just like, don't just see the vision, but they're like, okay, I'm going to put myself all the way into it. And they're not often the people that, you know, yeah, that are the dear old friends. So anyways, it's tender for me, and I think it's a really real question. Thank you. I'd be curious what Ericka, yeah, thank you. And if there are others who wanted to talk to that. Are you talking?
AnnieRose, if you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, sorry, y'all. I mean, I think there are different levels also. I mean, something we haven't talked about are different levels of community engagement. You know, there are, like, I think Josh said in the comments, you know, Swan Market co-housing describes themselves as neighbors you actually like. And there are, you know, there are communities like that that are structurally set up to encourage more co-housing, but don't have as much sort of this intentionality and deep work behind them. And that is an option. They are, I can put a link to some communities in Portland that operate like that. They're just, you know, kind of, well, like some of Eli Spivak's projects here. But when you have the money involved, you gotta have those deep connections, that deep trust. But also when you're forming the community, what you were saying, Clay, brings up the idea of like, how do you start this conversation with someone that you're not sure if you're going to be the fit? And I think going into it saying like, you know, maybe bringing a larger group of people together and saying, hey, like, we're going to go into this and we're going to explore this idea, but our friendship is the most important, and it's entirely possible this might not be the fit. So just like coming into that with that clear intention and honoring and preserving the friendship, and just making it so you're not in a place you're like, oh no, I'm really going to hurt the feelings of my really good friend because I don't want to make one of the biggest financial commitments I've ever made with them. Like, that's got to be okay at the beginning of the conversation. So just make that clear, because you might find out that I've lost, my policy has always been housemates, then friends, rather than friends, housemates, not friends. So, and that's just living with someone.
I think that's a really important piece, AnnieRose, because the people that I had the longest time friendships with, I made assumptions about them and how they would be in living together. And it was way more devastating for me when those assumptions didn't bear out than somebody that I had only known for a year or two. And those people like that enter into our community now, they have to put a whole bunch of stuff. We ask them a bunch of questions, you know, and we make it really clear what the agreement fields are. And so that way, that whole like expectation disappointment cycle especially based upon like, you know, longtime friendship thing, doesn't have to threaten the friendship. So yeah, thanks for layering that in.
Yeah, beautiful reflections. I can tell that we're touching something really, really real. And that feeds into a question that Anissa brought up, which is, what's the wisdom of starting with the land versus starting with your people? And I bet the two of you have thoughts on that. I want to share that in this whole process, there's going to be portals or thresholds that a community will cross as you make progress. And at each threshold, people are going to come in and out, and that's okay. For example, once you get your vision really clear, some people in your group are going to align deeply with it and some won't, and they'll leave, but you'll have new people joining you. And same when you find the land, it's going to be the dream land for some people in your group, and some people will be out, but others will be in. And that's okay, and that's definitely gonna happen, and it's something to set, like, just understand, like, set the expectation that that's gonna happen. Yeah, Cassandra and AnnieRose.
Do you want to
talk? May you be so lucky to have the money to start with the land. Sounds good. Great place to start. And most of the folks in Portland that I'm working with are depending on, they don't necessarily have the land to start with. So if you can get there, I think, I mean, if you have land that's really calling, that's really speaking, then you know, then people will come. That's may you be so lucky. That's a problem we need to have more of here in Portland.
Yeah, I think I would add maybe a different angle from the fact that when you do already have the land and you want to share it, then you have to be capable and willing to go through a power relinquishment process. And so that the people who join you, if you want them to join you as equally committed shareholders in the project, then you have to be willing to cede that power and equity stake. And that is you know, again, is that something that's in your journey that you're up for? I think that Matthew or somebody spoke to the value of having the land, because then you have one of your primary partners, and the land can speak to you spiritually, and the land can speak to you what's possible, what's the infrastructure, how many people can actually live with this land, and so the land is super important. So I think it's really, there are benefits to, yeah, may not benefits, but there's different pieces that come through at different stages. And so I think that I didn't get a chance to say this earlier, but I do think that it's good to have a group of at least 3 people. And so that you can pull out of that dyadic energy and at least have a third to create a circle. And so if you can have a minimum of 3 people to go through the land acquisition process, I think that's, and maybe like I don't want to put a max on it, but once you get beyond 5 or 6, cohesive decision making within that group it becomes more and more challenging. Think about going through a birth canal with that many people in it. It puts a lot of pressure. The land acquisition process has contractual contractions, so it will push people out, and so you want to have a good tight group to go through that with. So hopefully that speaks some to that question.
Curious, when you say having more than 5 or 6 people makes decisions hard, if you don't have, you know, within those 5 or 6 people enough money, like, how do you think about, okay, so is it you're just getting loans in that group, or if you do you have like friends and family or investors, and then it's like, feels like they're still part of the group, but I guess it's a different relationship. Maybe they don't have the same decision-making power. They're kind of just investing in a vision.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and it's
is that the way
tricky
you
for that
think
to.
about it, like having like a. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No.
It's tricky though, because if you get into that notion of like, oh, we need to add people because we need money, that can be, I mean, totally understand that. And like, you do need an amount of resources to create a center of gravity to like get through the acquisition process. But yeah, you could see the implicit challenges in like, oh, we need more money, so we need more people. So I think that yeah, if you can keep it to a tighter group, people have made it through the acquisition process. Like Jonas's group made it through with 10 people, and that. But personally, I've walked a lot of groups over that threshold. I've been their midwife for many passages. And it's really rare that groups of more than 6 actually stay a group through the purchasing of land process. So yeah, so I kind of would advise, and I like, there's some way that like I want to be wrong about that, but I'm just sharing a pattern observation, that is, yeah. And AnnieRose is shaking her head too, so.
Yep, that's oh, okay, I'm not muted either. I think also if, money can get to be a problem, but also remember that real estate is one of the most accessible ways for normal human beings to build wealth. And that's why the way that racism has impacted homeownership is so devastating, has such a huge impact on sort of the wealth disparities that we see now, is because that is such a wealth building activity. So your group, you're like, okay, we don't have enough money to buy the huge parcel in California. Like, oh, we'll maybe there's something smaller, like think of stages you can do. And something that's less, maybe your group is generating some income for a smaller stage, a smaller, shorter term project that is going to give you some of that experience you need as a group to move forward to something bigger, and maybe some of the funding. But yeah, that's you will get into some weird power trips around money, and not just power trips. You'll have to confront your own privileges, your own ideas about power and money and dynamics, and you got to face those. You got to come right up against those. You can't deny that they're there, and you can't pretend that the person who is giving the most, who is contributing the most money, isn't put by our society in a position of power. You got to address that, and you got to work through it as a group. And you got to look it in the face and make some decisions and feel and get to that place and really confront the system that we're ingrained in. And that's part of the deep revolutionary work here, is kind of confronting capitalism and these power structures and learning through those. So it's a really important journey, and it can have some pretty wide-ranging effects on how we live in this world. All right.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting into some really good stuff right now.
Yeah.
So let's see if anyone has one more burning question. Maybe we can do that, but otherwise I would close it down. But there hasn't been one more in the chat. Any final comments from any of our participants? All right.
And I'll say, I know you all are not, if you're in Portland, if you're in the Bay Area, you've got my contact information. I love talking about this stuff. If you want to bounce some ideas off me, send me an email. We can set up a time to chat. I really think having access to professionals is a place of, it's a place of privilege, and I want to be that resource. So send your friends. I'm always happy to bounce ideas around with folks.
Thanks, AnnieRose. You're an incredible resource.
Claire, thank you guys so much for organizing this. It was so awesome. And all of the panelists who came, so fantastic. Your guys' insight was so valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the whole team. Tibet and Aaron backstage, thank you. Yeah, so we're gonna send around the recording, we're gonna send around the directory, contacts for all of our panelists, and we can keep the conversation going on high-low. And yeah, I have a feeling this is gonna be the first of many really valuable learning opportunities on this topic. It goes so deep, there's so much more to explore. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. So well done. Thanks, everyone.
In 3 years, we'll look back and there'll be all these villages sprouting up from this conversation.
Yeah, villages everywhere. Go get them, everybody.
Help the villages.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.